Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we've got a slightly overdue video, one that's been a long time in the making with everything going on, including my recent move. But it is finally here, and I'm really excited to share it with you. This one's a long journey, so make sure you're comfortable, settle in, and let's dive right in. Long before she was feared as the Devourer, Amascut was a child of divinity, the daughter of Tumecan and Elidinus. Unlike most gods, her parents chose to live among their people. They longed for a family, but being divine, they could not conceive children as mortals did. Instead, they infused their essence into the animals of the desert, granting them spirit and form. And so Amascut began her life, not as a fearsome goddess, but as a small, mischievous kitten. She prowled their halls and raided their stores to sate her endless hunger, and her high-pitched yowls often interrupted Tumecan's counsels until he relented, allowing her to perch on his broad shoulders. She found it embarrassing, but comforting all the same. This form, the cat, would follow her throughout her existence. To most mortals, she appeared not as a mighty lioness, but as something smaller, deceptively harmless. Yet even in those earliest days, her hunger was insatiable. From these beginnings, Amascut and her brother Icthlarin inherited both divinity and pride. They flaunted their power, reveling in the status as gods among mortals. Tumecan, angered by their arrogance, cast them into responsibility. Icthlarin was made guardian of the underworld, and Amascut was named goddess of rebirth. Together, they oversaw the fate of all souls. Death would bring the departed to the river Numenor. Icthlarin would guide those seeking peace, and Amascut judged those who yearned to live again, granting them trial to earn their return. It was meant to humble them, to teach them balance. But their world was not safe. Zaros's empire stretched across Gielinor, and even the lands of Tumecan came under threat. Eager to prove themselves, the siblings sought allies, and their search led them to Freneskeg, a shattered world still clinging to life. There, they discovered the Marjurat, fierce, magical beings. Amascut and Icthlarin offered them places of honor within their father's empire. But the offer split the Marjurat. Brothers turned on brothers, and blood was spilled. Horrified by the violence, Amascut abandoned their settlement. Alone, she followed a dark whisper to the mouth of a volcano, where she found the slumbering elder god, Ma. Fragile, unstable, and close to death. Moved by compassion, Amascut performed the ritual of rejuvenation, sacrificing half of her divine essence to stabilize Ma. In doing so, she severed her ties to her father's power, leaving her weakened and changed. Icthlarin arrived too late to stop her. He could only watch as his sister gave away a part of herself, alone in the dark, burdened with a sacrifice no one would ever acknowledge. When the siblings returned to Gielinor, the Marjurat came with them, but Amascut was absent. By the time she returned, everything had already unraveled. The Marjurat betrayed the Menephites. Zaros's armies had advanced, and at last, Tumecan had sacrificed himself, unleashing a cataclysm that scoured the desert in endless sand. Their father was gone. Their mother, Elidinis, grief-stricken, soon departed as well. Ixthlarin was left to bear their people's survival, torn between the underworld and the mortal realm. And Amascut. She was left with nothing. Her sacrifice on Freneskeg unrecognised, her people in ruins, and her family shattered. Her disillusionment deepened. She sought out her brother Scabarus, telling him their parents' vision was dead and their duties meaningless. She confessed the hunger gnawing at her soul, that she had begun consuming spirits, finding fleeting comfort in their essence. She urged him to abandon Tumecan's ideals, but Scabarus refused, rejecting her despair. Rejection became the refrain of her life. When she later challenged Ixthlarin for leadership of the desert, a council of gods and mortals gathered to decide. They judged both siblings, weighing their flaws and strengths. In the end, however, they declared that no one god should rule. Authority must be shared, as Tumecan had once shared his own. Ixthlarin accepted with humility, acknowledging his own struggle. But Amascut heard only betrayal. Once again, in her mind, she had been denied. That moment was the breaking point. Wounded and bitter, she abandoned her post as goddess of rebirth. Grief twisted into rage, hunger into obsession. Souls she once guided to new life, she now consumed entirely, erasing them forever. Her temples fell. Her followers were slaughtered by her own hand. Even her priesthood turned against her, cursing her name and binding her to the desert. Amascut had cast aside her purpose, her family, and her faith. No longer was she the goddess of rebirth. She was something else now. A scourge whispered in fear across the desert, a terror in both life and death. She was now the Devourer. Though Amascut's corruption was gradual, her rejection of the council's judgment marked the turning point of no return. Once she had been the goddess of rebirth, granting souls another chance at life, now she consumed them entirely, denying their return, obliterating them from existence. Her transformation terrified the desert. Temples raised in her honor were reduced to ruin. Worshippers who prayed for her blessing were devoured alongside the faith they offered. Even her own clergy were not spared. In desperation, her surviving priestesses, led by Nite, turned against their goddess. Together, they enacted a powerful curse. The ritual stripped Amascut of her original form, forbidding her from possessing mortal bodies for long, binding her within the Kharidian sands, and condemning her to obscurity. She would be forgotten, unable to gather loyal followers again. The Devourer's wrath was swift. In vengeance, she twisted her priestesses into cats. A cruel irony, for it was the form she herself had once worn with innocence. They retained fragments of her own divine gifts, and from that day forward, cats would be creatures she both feared and despised. Ixthlarin intervened, granting them immortality, for he feared that if they all perished, the curse upon Amascut might one day break. Bound and diminished, her power seemed broken. Yet across the long millennia, the curse began to weaken, and Amascut's hunger found new avenues. Amidst the turmoil of the desert, She donned the mask of a mortal woman and sought out warriors. With honeyed words, she convinced them to form the Order of the Slayer Masters. She spoke of purpose, of protecting the people by striking down the monsters that plagued the land. Warriors such as Catalax and Phaser listened, believing her their benefactor. They built their base at the sunken pyramid. They hunted deadly beasts, confident they were safeguarding villages and towns. But the truth was darker. The enchanted gems they carried were crafted to siphon the souls of their kills, not into safety, but into Amascut herself. Every hunt fed the Devourer. Every victory strengthened her curse-breaking hunger. One among them, Nakatra, learned the truth, and instead of resisting, she embraced it. She pledged herself to Amascut's service. Beneath Polnivner, she constructed a vast machine to funnel souls directly to her, filling its chambers with captives meant as offerings. When Catalax uncovered the deception, he destroyed the machine beyond repair. Enraged, Amascut struck him down. His wife, Phaser, she murdered soon after, binding their spirits to their places of death, ensuring the two would never reunite, even in the afterlife. It was a cruelty as deliberate as it was merciless. The surviving Slayer Masters fled, abandoning the desert and vowing to continue their craft far from the Devourer's influence. But Nakatra, ever loyal, vanished into the jungles of Karamja, carrying her hunger into new lands. With her brother Ixthlarin consumed by his ceaseless duty in the underworld, and her parents long gone, Amascut turned her fury on the remaining gods of the desert. Krondis, the crocodile-headed goddess of resourcefulness, was the first to fall. Amascut tainted her with corrupted matter, and Krondis consumed it, and her mind bent under the weight of the Devourer's influence. Her once wise followers grew savage, their fury spreading unrest throughout the land. Next, Amascut sought Tumecan, the monkey-headed goddess of joy and friendship. She tore away Tumecan's senses, sight, hearing, and speech, and shaped them into 3 demonic apes, Ayuni, Iruni, and Leuni. These beasts rampaged across the desert, slaughtering nearly every monkey in existence. Only 3 survivors escaped, each bereft of a stolen sense, and fled to Ape Atoll. From them, a new society would rise, born from Amascut's cruelty. Het, the god of fortitude, she weakened through unknown means. What is remembered is that his strength waned, and with it, Kharid's people felt their bond to their patron god grow thin. Their cultural spirit was fractured. Only Scabarus, the god of isolation, escaped her corruption. He hid himself deep within a sanctum, sealing his refuge with powerful wards and carrying with him a divine shard once held by Elidinus. Menephite scribes misread his retreat as betrayal and branded him dangerous, twisting history against him. For centuries, Amascut's hunger festered in the shadows of the desert. She had turned from goddess to devourer, and though priestesses bound her with curses, the weight of her power was never truly contained. Millennia passed, empires rose and fell, but the whisper of her name still carried fear. And in the 5th Age, her schemes took new shape. The world no longer saw her as the kitten at Tumecan's side, nor the goddess of rebirth who once judged souls. Now she cloaked herself in a mortal guise, weaving deception in place of worship. Her claws reached not through temples, but through plots of intrigue and crime. Disguised as a hooded mastermind known as Lady Kelly, Amascut set her sights on the Kharid Ib, a diamond said to hold the blessing of Het himself, once gifted to the rulers of Kharid. To possess it would not only grant her immense power, but unravel the stability of the desert once more. Her plan was ruthless. She would kidnap Prince Ali Mirza, heir to the throne of Kharid, and ransom his life for the Kharid Ib. To do so, she gathered pawns. The thugs, Apep and Heru. The gang of Draenor known as the Skulls, led by Khnum, once a loyal palace guard, but embittered and exiled after a fateful encounter with a young Ozan years before. Old grudges, festering wounds, all were tools for the Devourer to exploit. And so, in the year 169 of the Fifth Age, Lady Kelly struck. Prince Ali was seized in Lumbridge and dragged into her plot. With the prince in her grasp, Kharid was left vulnerable. If the Emir defied her, the heir would die. If he gave in, the Kharid Ib would pass into her hands. For Amascut, either path led to ruin. For the desert, for its people, and for the legacy of Tumecan. But fate would not leave her unchecked. Ozan, now grown from the thief he once was, and an adventurer destined to shape the ages, uncovered her scheme. Together they exposed Khnum, following the trail to Draenor and finally confronting Kelly herself. Steel met spell, and though her thralls were cut down, Amascut slipped away, the prince still bound to her designs. In Kharid, the turmoil grew. The ailing Emir clung to life, beset by the demands of the Menethite ambassadors who sought to place one of their own upon the throne should Kharid's line falter. Osman, Spymaster, and Shadow of the Throne counselled resistance. Hassan urged caution, and the Emir himself clutched the Kharid Ib. His heart, his legacy, refusing to part with it even for his son's safety. As debate raged, the Emir collapsed, his heart giving away at last. His death left Kharid teetering between despair and invasion, with its heir stolen away and its most sacred relic under threat of falling into Amascut's claws. The Devourer's hunger had found a new age to feed upon. The Devourer's hunger was never for food alone. She craved relics of power, symbols of her family's legacy, to twist them into instruments of her vengeance. None was more coveted than the Kharid Ib, a diamond said to be blessed by Het himself, a gift once given to Kharid's rulers, a relic that embodied both faith and authority in the desert. To possess it was to hold the heart of a kingdom. Through her guise as Lady Kelly, Amascut had already stolen the prince. Now she sought the diamond itself. But even here, shadows warred with shadows. Osman, Spymaster of Kharid, revealed his hand. The stone displayed in the palace vault had been a decoy all along. The true Kharid Ib was hidden away, and with careful phrasing and veiled words, Osman allowed Ozan and the adventurer to, quote, steal it, disobeying the Emir's dying command, but choosing to gamble on salvation. The Kharid Ib, however, was no mere jewel. As soon as they entered the desert, the diamond stirred. It spoke through mortals, from Shantae at the desert's gate to the bandit king himself. It conjured sundials of the lesser gods from beneath the sands, guiding the adventurers forward, pleading to be taken home. It even lashed out violently, summoning ambushes and quicksand to test them. Here, another figure moved unseen. Scabarus, long thought banished by Amascut. In secret, he commanded his creatures to steal the stone for himself. For a moment, the Kharid was lost to the Calphites, but fate returned it once more to the adventurer's hands, aided by Leela, Osman's estranged daughter. At last, the trail led to the Lion's Mouth, the shattered ruins of Amascut's own temple. There, Lady Kelly awaited with Apep, Haru, and the captive Prince Ali. The diamond cried out through its thralls, begging not to be handed over, but Kelly's will was iron. With fury, she forced possession upon one of the party, compelling them to surrender the gem. Her triumph was venomous. She held the Kharid at last, cold and hard in her grasp after centuries of longing. Mocked by Ozan, her mask slipped.
I am not crazy! I am a goddess!
Her voice thundering across the broken temple.
I am Amascut!
The revelation shattered any illusion. The kidnappings, the ransom, the Menethite plots, all were threads in the Devourer's weaving. With a conjured sandstorm, she unleashed her fury, setting her lackeys upon Ozan, Leela, and the adventurer, ordering Prince Ali's death. But even gods miscalculate. Heru and Apep fell, their bodies claimed by the Calphites. The prince was freed and restored to Kharid, ascending as its new emir. For the moment, Menephos was held at bay, yet Amascut's victory was secured. The Kharid, the heart of the desert, was hers. In the aftermath, the truth grew darker still. The Menethite ambassador, Jabari, was revealed as her co-conspirator, the very hand that had poisoned Amir Shah. His treachery had been one more stone in Amascut's foundation, laid to fracture Kharid and reignite old war. With cold satisfaction, she sent him back to Menephos, her schemes far from finished. The Devourer had revealed her face, and the desert would never be the same. For all her schemes to fracture kingdoms and steal relics, Amascut's truest hunger was never forgotten. Souls. Where once she had judged them fairly, offering rebirth, now she sought only to consume, to strip them of existence. And so, she came to Sophanem, cloaked not in grandeur, but in deception once more. A ragged wanderer, her form frail, her voice weary. Few would have seen a goddess in this figure. Fewer still would have recognized the Devourer hiding in plain sight. But she had set her sights upon the soul of Clenta, the city's late high priest. If she could seize his essence before her brother Ictharin guided it to the afterlife, she would not only feed her hunger, but wound the desert's faith itself. When an adventurer crossed her path, Amascut reached into their mind. Her gaze locked upon theirs, and her voice dripped with false kindness. Through hypnosis, she bent them to her will. With her unholy symbol pressed into their hand, she sent them into Sophanem to desecrate Clenta's tomb. Yet her disguise could not mask everything. Outside her tent lay a humble cat, and before its gaze, she recoiled. For the curse laid upon her by her priestesses lingered still, and cats remained her one lingering fear, a reminder of the faith she had once betrayed. Within the pyramid, the adventurers staggered through flashbacks of actions not their own, stealing canopic jars, planting a Amascut symbol within sacred sarcophagi, all while unaware of her control. Only the Sphinx, guardian of riddles and ally of cats, could cut through the deception, granting the adventurer a token to prove their mind was no longer enslaved. But Amascut's trap had already been set. When the priests of Sophanem gathered for the sacred rites of Clenta's burial, the Wanderer reappeared. She no longer whispered, she struck. Possessing one of the priests, she forced him to slaughter his brethren before their horrified eyes. Though her attempt was thwarted, her laughter echoed as she vanished. The chaos and bloodshed she left behind, more fuel for her hatred. It was only through Icthlarin himself that the adventurer was freed from her lingering spell. The Jackal of the Underworld intervened, unravelling his sister's enchantment, sparing the mortal from being her puppet forever. But the damage was already done. In the struggle, another adventurer delivered Clenta's organs into her grasp, and his soul remained trapped in her shadow. The desert had seen once more the true nature of the Devourer. Not just a schemer of thrones, but a predator of souls, ever hungry, ever spiteful, and always one step ahead of her brother. If Amascut could not shatter the desert through thrones and relics, she would poison its very breath. Her theft of Clenta's soul was not an end, but a beginning. With the canopic jar in her possession, Sophanem was left exposed, and the Devourer struck with plagues. First came the disease, red welts across the faces of Sophanem's people. Then the locusts, swarming in clouds that devoured crops and left only dust. The city's cattle sickened, their milk turned sour, their flesh putrid. And along the Elid's banks, grotesque frogs burst upon the shore, swollen and rotting, their bodies toxic to the touch. Life itself seemed to decay under her shadow. The Pharaoh of Menethos, hearing of the sickness, sealed his city against its sister. The gates were barred, archers stationed, and Sophanem was cut off from the world. What was once a plague became a prison. The truth was fouler even still. The blight was not nature's doing, nor the will of the gods Sophanem still clung to. It was Amascut. He had taken upon herself the guise of her banished sibling, Scabarus, whispering into the minds of his scattered followers. In the darkness beneath Uluk's ruins, her voice became their law. The Scabarans, zealots and scarab men twisted by worship, became her tools, striking from below at Sophanem's foundations. Through dungeons riddled with spikes, pits and swarms of scarabs, adventurers and spies alike sought to pierce this conspiracy. Mesa, Osmond's own agent, found herself trapped beyond a great chasm. Her partner, Khalif, slain by Amascut's monstrous guardians. Osmond himself was drawn into the struggle, facing the colossal scarab born of her command. A living fortress of chitin and malice. For all his skill, even the spy master faltered, feigning death to survive as the adventurer struck the beast down. Yet Amascut's corruption ran even deeper. The High Priest of Scarabrus himself was found enthralled, his memory wiped and replaced, a puppet spouting her doctrine. In his voice came her command: to destroy, to abandon the world of light, to let rot and silence consume all. Only through patient words and battle was he freed, the adventurer piercing through the fog of her influence until the truth was laid bare. Once again, Amascut had shown the scope of her power. Not only could she twist mortals, but she could take the image of a god, bending worship into her own weapon. Through plague, through fear, through the Scabarite's zeal, she turned faith into a blade against her brother and the desert he loved. The Devourer had seeded herself in Sophanem's soil, and every crop, every prayer, every breath of its people reminded them of her hunger. For all her plagues and manipulations, one thorn remained in the Devourer's side: the mortal who time and time again had thwarted her. The theft of Clenta's soul, the corruption of the Scarabites, even her hold on the Kharid Ib. All had been endangered by this single interloper. Amascut's hunger turned to hatred, and hatred demanded blood. She chose Polynivia, a town of dust and lawlessness where gangs already whispered her name in worship. There she cloaked herself once more, this time in the guise of Simona, a red-haired woman with soft words and a story of sorrow. She told the adventurer her sister, Jesmona, had been kidnapped by Scarabite cultists and dragged into a dungeon beneath the town. A damsel in distress, helpless, pleading, it was the perfect lure. But the desert does not lack for truth speakers. And once again, it was a cat who saw her clearly. Alley Cat barred the way, warning that the dungeon reeked of smoke and banshee wails that would tear the mind apart. To prepare, the adventurer sought out Catalax, a dead Slayer Master whose soul still lingered in torment. His tale was bitter. Once of Uluk, he had earned Amascut's wrath, and in revenge, she had bound his spirit, denying him peace in death. Through him, the adventurer forged the means to resist the banshees, but also glimpsed once more the depths of her cruelty. Armed and ready, they descended. The dungeon was a maze of horrors, banshees whose cries would shatter will, insectoid assassins lurking in the shadows, and, at its heart, the banshee mistress herself. Jesmona, the supposed captive, looked on with strange anger as the cult fought to the last. But when the mistress fell, the mask cracked. The assassins turned to their goddess, crying out apologies for their failure, and Jesmona revealed herself. With a voice full of fury, she condemned them. Lightning ripped through the chamber, frying her own followers where they stood. The book that had bound the monsters to her will, he reduced to ash. And then she was gone, leaving only the bitter taste of betrayal. Back in Polnivna, Simona smiled sweetly, feigning gratitude for her sister's rescue. But the act was thin. The adventurer had survived yet again, and so she twisted her scheme anew. She made herself a Slayer Master, sending the mortal on task after task. It was her hope that one day, the beasts of the Slayer's path would do what she could not. end their life. But every monster slain, every assignment completed, only deepened her frustration. For the adventurer would not break, and the Devourer's hatred burned hotter still. The failed assassination left Amascut bitter, but not beaten. If she could not slay the meddling adventurer outright, she would continue to unravel the gods themselves. Atmacan, gentle patron of friendship, laughter, and mischief, had long been among her victims. When Amascut cursed her, she robbed her of voice, her sight, and hearing. In their absence, Atmacan could no longer guide the desert's people toward joy and unity. Silence replaced song, suspicion replaced trust, and a once bright spirit was muted into obscurity. But Amascut's cruelty went further still. From Atmacan's stolen senses, she shaped 3 abominations: Leuni, Euni, and Iruni. Each one was a grotesque parody of what had been taken: speech, sight, and hearing, reborn as twisted demons. These creations she unleashed upon the monkeys, sacred to Atmacan and beloved in the desert's earliest days. The massacre was near total. Only 3 monkeys survived, fleeing across the seas to Ape Atoll. Centuries later, when Queen Senlitin's spirit stirred and sought the restoration of her people's lost harmony, the adventurer brought the monkeys back. A colony was founded in the desert. Stalls raised, roots opened, and the 3 wise monkeys returned: Iwazaru, Mizaru, and Kikazaru, the last echoes of Atmacan's scattered children. But Amascut had been waiting. History repeated itself in blood. The new colony was torn apart, the monkeys slaughtered, the wise ones stolen away by the very horrors she had made from Atmacan's essence. The desert's laughter was silenced again, drowned in screams and ash. One by one, the adventurer faced these monstrosities. Leuni fell in the same dungeon where Amascut had once donned the mask of Jesmona. Euni was destroyed in the Calphite Hive, where her gaze had watched the desert twist into crime and shadow. And in the heart of Uza's ruined world, Iruni, the most terrible of the 3, summoned demons to her side, her deafening magic striking with fury. Yet even she was cast down, and with her death, the senses stolen from Atmacan were finally restored. The goddess of friendship returned, her voice, her eyes, her hearing, all whole again. She appeared before the adventurer, offering gratitude and vowing to stand ready against Amascut when the time came. But the monkeys could not sense her presence. To them, the adventurer seemed to be speaking to the empty air, mad from the desert heat. It was the perfect symbol of Amascut's legacy. Even when she's defeated, she left her victims doubting themselves, their gods, and their place in the world. Through theft, through slaughter, through desecration, she had proven once more that she was not merely the devourer of flesh, but the devourer of hope. No matter how many times the adventurer foiled her, Amascut's ambitions only grew darker. Her plots no longer concerned merely devouring souls or spreading plagues. Now she sought to unmake the very order of the desert itself. The adventurer's victories had undone much of her work. Frondis was freed from corruption. Het long clouded by manipulation, saw clearly once more. Only Scabarus remained absent, and already the living spirits of Tumecan's pantheon, began to stir, preparing to stand against her. But Amascut's schemes were never built on patience. She would not wait for resistance to gather. When the Pharaoh of Menethos fell, exposed as her thrall, executed by Osman's dagger, Amascut scarcely blinked. To her, kings were pawns, tools to be used and discarded. She had already moved beyond mortal rulers, toward a far greater prize. At the soul altar, with the Kharid Ib suspended above her, she began her final ritual. Jabari, loyal even in death, and her thralls trembled as the diamond's voice broke through them. It was Tumecan himself, speaking through the relic, his voice quaking with sorrow and fear. He pleaded with her, pleaded with his daughter. He begged her to let go of her fury, to abandon destruction. But Amascut had long since abandoned mercy. The name of daughter was now a curse to her, a chain of blood she despised. With a voice that shook the altar itself, she screamed, "I am not your daughter.
I am Amascut."
Her denial was more than words. It was an act of final severance. He rejected Tumecan, rejected kinship, rejected redemption. The goddess of rebirth and protection that she might have been was forever devoured, leaving only the Devourer in its place. Power surged from the Kharid Ib, lashing into Jabari and the thralls, into Amascut herself, into the altar of souls. The chamber quaked under the release, a storm of anima and anguish. The father's plea and the daughter's wrath clashed in that very moment, and the world felt the weight of her choice. Amascut did not falter. She had torn free of Tumecan's shadow, no longer a child of the desert's creator, no longer bound by lineage or expectation. She stood as something far worse, a goddess who had devoured her own name and claimed only hunger in its place. The Devourer had never been more complete. The wars of gods and elders came and went. Sliske's twisted games ended in blood. The shadow of the elder gods passed. Zamorak's bid for conquest had faltered, and even Raziel, the lord of undeath, was cast down. Through it all, Amascut remained apart. She did not join in these struggles, nor seek alliances, nor stand against them. But absence did not mean surrender. The Devourer simply waited, always hungering. In the quiet that followed, whispers stirred in the city of A suspicious stranger lingered at the docks, her manner lifeless, her eyes vacant, yet her purpose clear: to draw the souls of the dead into the sanctum of rebirth. This was Amascut's work. Her thralls stronger now, bound tighter to her will than ever before. The stranger promised lost spirits a second chance, but those who followed were not reborn. They were taken, sacrificed, fuel for the Devourer's growing power. Her chosen agent, Nakatra. She presided within the sanctum, leading Amascut's faithful and feasting upon the dead who were lured inside. The plot might have gone unnoticed, hidden beneath the veil of the underworld, had the stranger not unwittingly sent the very adventurer who had opposed Amascut so many times before. Disguised by a malignant mortifier, foul potion of zombification, the adventurer walked the path of the lost, crossing the gondola into Amascut's domain. There, in the sanctum's shadows, the deception broke, and Icthlarin himself intervened, finding the stranger and naming the truth aloud. This was Amascut's hand at work, reaching from the desert into the realm of the dead. Yet even here, she had underestimated her foe. The adventurer pressed on, cutting through the sanctum's horrors, until finally confronting Nakatra herself. Amascut's servant fell. Her plot undone, the soul spared from her maw. But the victory was not absolute. For if the sanctum had been built at all, then Amascut's hunger had not waned. She no longer merely plagued the living, she had turned her gaze to the dead themselves, seeking to claim even those souls that rightfully belonged to her brother's care. The Devourer had grown bolder, and the line between her dominion and Icthlarin's grew thinner with every scheme. Amascut's hunger could no longer be contained to whispers in tombs or quiet corruption in shadow. She sent forth her arcs, ghostly predators that swept across Kharid, spreading a curse that turned the living into soul devourers, creatures bound to her endless feast. Panic gripped the desert. The Devourer's war had begun. The adventurer rushed to the gate of Elidinus with Icthlarin and even Zemarigal in tow. The gate, once a sacred device of Elidinus, meant to guide souls to rebirth or dissolution, now bled corruption, warped by Amascut into a weapon of annihilation. In purifying it, the adventurer was dragged into the Shadow Sands, where one of Amascut's avatars waited. Through it, she spoke with unmasked fury. She railed at the Marjorat, who had once betrayed her kindness, and promised that her vengeance would begin with the adventurer's death. In her eyes, all souls were stained, unworthy of rebirth, fit only to be devoured. And yet, despite her unleashed wrath, the adventurer endured even still. Even as her voice thundered and her armies closed in on the hidden Scabarus, they fought her off long enough for Icthlarin to pull them free. But her threat rang clear. Once she seized Scabarus, the last fragment of Tumecan still concealed, the desert would feel the full power of their father through her. Soon after, that prophecy came to pass. Guided by a golden scarab, the adventurer and Leela discovered the long-hidden Temple of Isolation, where Scabarus dwelled in silence. Osman's agent, Conus, betrayed them, shattering the wards that kept Amascut at bay. He was sent by Osman to kill Scabarus. Amascut descended on the temple like a storm before he had a chance, her shadow blotting out the light of that secret refuge. She sought to consume Scabarus's divinity, to strip from him the fragment of Tumecan he still carried. But Scabarus had foreseen her. He had hidden it away, leaving only his isolation and wisdom intact. With sudden clarity, Amascut realized she had been denied. Enraged but unbroken, she swore an ultimatum. Give me what I desire, or by the next new moon, I will bring Menephos to ruin. Scabarus, scarred by her wrath, imprisoned her with a barrier long enough for Leela and the adventurer to escape. Before parting, he revealed the truth of her design. Amascut was not merely hunting her siblings out of malice, she was gathering their fragments, each piece of Tumecan's essence. With them, she intended to fashion an echo of their father, only to devour him, body and soul, and take his power for herself. It was annihilation she sought, nothing less. The desert, Gielinor, perhaps even herself, all would be consumed. Yet amid this revelation, another truth had surfaced. Deep within the shifting tombs, the adventurer encountered the strange cats who had long shadowed Amascut's tale, and among them, Estepet. They warned that she could not simply be destroyed. To kill her would mean to shatter what little remained of the goddess she had once been, leaving only a void. If the desert were to heal, if the cycle of grief and hunger were to end, she would need to be shown another path. For the Devourer was not born of nothing. She was Amascut, Tumecan's daughter, Elidinus's child, once a guardian of balance. Her fall had been long and terrible, but her pain was real, and her corruption ran deep. If she were slain, it would mean the desert's final light was truly extinguished. The choice, as ever, would fall to those who faced her. The moon turned green above the desert. The eclipse had come, the omen of Amascut's wrath. Menephos braced itself as the Devourer gathered her armies, the soul devourers and corrupt arcs pouring forth from the tombs and sands. At last, she had consumed enough power to cast aside the bindings of her priestesses and reclaim her true, terrible form. In Sophanem, she revealed herself not as Nathifa, the merchant, but as the goddess in full. She offered the adventurer a choice: join her cause, embrace the destruction of the world, and have their soul devoured last. But the adventurer refused her promise of ruin. And so, under the shadow of the eclipse, Amascut unleashed war. Sophanem streets became a battlefield of devourers and corruption, only to be repelled by the combined strength of the adventurer, Het, and Atmacun. Yet her fury did not abate. At the monkey colony, she twisted Mizaru, Kikazaru, and Iwazaru into monstrous parodies, tormenting Atmacun with the same cruelty she herself had endured when her senses were torn from her. At last, she turned her gaze upon Menephos itself. The bough gathered, Scabarus, Het, Crondis, Atmacun, and Ictharin, each lending their blessing. Tumecan's fragment, once hidden by Scabarus, was unearthed, infused with Scarab's memories so that, should Amascut consume it, she would be forced to confront the truth. The gods stood at Menephos's gates, mortals at their side, as the Devourer descended in full force. The battle raged. Streets burned. Arcs and Devourers clashed against soldiers, priests, and beasts alike. But Amascut's great weapon was not her horde. It was her bond to Erebus, the Shadow Realm. Only by severing that bond, with Ictharin's guidance and the adventurer's strength, could the tide be turned. When the connection snapped, her army faltered, and Menephos was still held. On the steps of the Imperial District, the end drew near. Amascut, consumed by desperation, fused the stolen Kharid and Tumecan's fragment, seeking at last to claim her father's might. But she had not expected the fragment's weight of memory, grief, loss, and truth overwhelming her. From it, Tumecan's manifestation arose. He did not strike her down. Instead, he sought to restore her. He split his essence, half to Amascut, half to the adventurer, and charged them to keep his daughter in check if she faltered again. For the first time in an age, Amascut felt whole. But her joy curdled into rage. When she sensed the adventurer bore her father's light as well, she struck out, declaring herself Tumecan's true heir. The two clashed in a vision of her own making, a warped golden palace, a kingdom forged for her own dominion. She fought as the goddess of destruction she had become, summoning shadows, soul obelisks, and storms of corruption. Yet, in the end, the adventurer stood triumphant. Broken, she lashed out one final time, and Ictharin threw himself before the blow. Her brother fell. For the first time in millennia, Amascut's mask cracked. Horror overtook her. Ictharin, her anchor in the storm, lay dead by her own hand. She admitted then what she had never spoken, that despite all her bitterness, Ictharin was the only good left in her world, and without him, she could not live. In grief and desperation, she sacrificed the very power she had clawed back. Together with the adventurer, she restored Ictharin's car, his divine essence, and drew him back from death. He returned weary but alive, and asked why she had cast away all that she had gained. Her answer was quiet and trembling. When Tumecan left, she thought to fill the emptiness in her chest with his essence. She thought devouring the world would ease that hunger. But power could not mend the void. And when Ictharin fell, she realized there was nothing left worth consuming. And so, the Devourer fell silent. Amascut renounced her title and her hunger. She vowed never again to feast upon the souls of mortals. Yet she did not take back her mantle as the goddess of rebirth either. That, she admitted, was never her choice to begin with. Tumecan had forced it upon her, binding her fate to a duty she had never wanted. Now she would choose nothing at all. She would walk no path until she found her own. In the aftermath of the battle, her siblings' responses were divided. Het would aid her only if she atoned. Scabarus, ever impartial, accepted her without condition. Crondis stood wary, but open to reconciliation. Atmacan, still scarred by her cruelty, and Leela, hardened by betrayal, offered no forgiveness. Amascut withdrew to the Sanctum of Rebirth, where she had once schemed to consume the souls of the dead. Now, she lingers in isolation, speaking to those who visit, but dwelling mostly in silence. She ponders atonement, uncertain if she deserves it, uncertain if she even desires it. Once she had declared herself the Devourer, the end of all things. Now, she is something else, something lost, perhaps broken, but not beyond the possibility of change. For the first time since her fall, all those many years ago, the desert knows peace. But Amascut's tale is not over. Thank you so much for watching this video. It's been a long one. And if you're still here at the end, let me know in the comments below. If you made it this far, I must know. Let me know your thoughts on any topics of lore you'd like to see covered in the future. Until next time, as always, I will see you all in Gillinor.